Beth Messick, thank you so much for joining me here at the Business of Innovation Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. Beth, I think as in our podcast, we're always talking to people about innovative things that they're doing at work and in their roles in their organizations. And when I think of that, you are one of the first people that comes to mind. The work that you do is so amazing and so creative and different. And I wondered if you would just talk about your role at Jasmine Road and how you came to be in that, the executive director.
Yeah, so I'm the executive director of Jasmine Road. We've been up and running about 2 years now. We're a residential program for women that have survived human trafficking, prostitution, and addiction. And I really got started with this population of women about 5 years ago, recognizing human trafficking was a reality in Greenville. There was not a lot of resources and not a lot of things happening to provide services for these women. And I heard about a woman that was on the streets, and I thought, you know what? I want to go find this girl. Mm-hmm. So I went out there. My husband went with me, and we sort of started hanging out on the streets and meeting some of the women that were prostituting and some of the women that were coming out of jail. Mm-hmm. And we met dope dealers and pimps, and just a real interesting phenomenon that was mm-hmm. happening right here on the streets of Greenville, and really, really surprising. So my passion became like, how do we help these women? And what happened, what I became to understand mm-hmm. was that it was multiple women, but one story.
Wow.
And that story was a story of childhood physical abuse, sexual abuse, mm-hmm. coming from really traumatic backgrounds. And they were either on their way to the detention center or they'd just gotten out of the detention center. Mm-hmm. So the jail becomes a revolving door for these women and just an endless cycle. Mm-hmm. And so my passion was, how do we break this cycle of homelessness, mm-hmm. prostitution, drug addiction, trafficking, incarceration? And like I said, it's an endless cycle that women have a hard time getting out of.
And what a huge, huge issue for you to suddenly feel called, really.
Yeah,
To
exactly.
step out and try to, think of moving someone from off the street into some kind of a healing situation, not only there, but then also into some kind of a business and employment. And that's what we so love about your story, is you're taking them the whole way,
right.
Yeah.
Well, you really have to, and I think you have to think critically about the issue. And as I began to understand it, it's really complicated. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just about getting women off the street, mm-hmm. because they didn't have job skills, and they dropped out of school, and they had layer of complex trauma, things that they needed to deal with so that they could mm-hmm. hold down a job and be successful. So what we began to understand was the healing process is just part of the equation. If they don't have a way to make an income, mm-hmm. then they'll go right back to the streets and right back mm-hmm. to prostitution and to where they came from.
Right. I have to ask you, was there something particular that inspired you? Where did that come from?
Well, for me, my faith obviously mm-hmm. is a big driver in what I do. It was always instilled in me that everyone has worth and value. And mm-hmm. I can remember when I went to school, my mom would always say, make sure you thank the bus driver when you get off the bus,
wow.
and make sure you thank the school janitor. And those are people that a lot of times you don't even think about and you forget mm-hmm. about. And I remember my bus driver in middle school going, thank you for what? What do you mean? I said, well,
wow.
thank you for driving me home. And that was just mm-hmm. my normal. And understanding that we're all made of strength and struggle, and that no one is better than someone else. So mm-hmm. that was kind of my framework as I was growing up. And then I became a victim of childhood sexual abuse and sexual exploitation when I was older. And so, those things that happened to me, mm-hmm. it took years as far as healing and, mm-hmm. and resources and counseling and that kind of thing for me to get my life stabilized and on track. And my heart really goes out to those women that they don't have those kind of resources. I mean, I came from a great family, mm-hmm. and I could access counseling and had mentors and people in my life that really poured into me and made a difference. And
wow.
we're dealing with a population of women that they don't have any of that. Mm-hmm. Their experience might be, my mom sold me for drugs when I was 9 years old mm-hmm. on the streets of Greenville. Mm-hmm. And I've heard that story, and I've heard that story multiple times. Mm-hmm. So understanding where these women are coming from mm-hmm. and understanding that they can't access the Greenville that we know. And I grew up in Greenville and always had access to services and love Greenville. And these women are right here in our community, but they're afraid of law enforcement. They're afraid to go to the hospital because they think that someone's going to run their name and find out that they have warrants, and then they're going to be put in jail. So helping those women access those services, for me is really important.
You recently, I'm going to move into this question for just a moment, but you recently partnered with the case study class at Clemson University MBA for the sake of a particular question that you were seeking an answer to.
Right.
And so talk a little bit about what you're looking to find and how you will be using that information.
So one of the drivers, what we're doing, obviously helping women off the streets is beneficial in a number of ways in our community. But one of the most important ways that we don't even really think about is the economics of that. And I can give an example. One of the women that has come through the Jasmine Road program, she was incarcerated 23 times in a 2.5-year period in Greenville County. 23 times she was in jail for however long she was there, and 23 arrests and 23 public defenders. And we as a community, we're paying for that.
Absolutely.
And so, what our question was, how much, does it cost our community for the women that are running around the streets versus how much are we saving the community when we're able to take them off the streets and put them in a long-term healing program such as Jasmine Road. The estimates from Thistle Farms, which is in Nashville, Tennessee, and that's our sister community, they estimate a $700,000 savings to the Nashville community per year based on the work that they're doing. So that answering that question, I think, is really important, and gets to the heart of what we're doing, because this impacts society.
Yes.
It impacts all of us, whether you know someone or not. The economics of it impacts everybody.
And that number that you just shared, is that a per person, per year number?
As a per year, $700,000 savings per year.
Per year, if you take one person.
It's for the 25 women. They serve
the 25 women.
Yeah, so
Okay.
they serve 25 women in their community.
Okay, no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Wow. So you want to make sure that as you run this business, essentially,
Exactly,
that
yeah.
you have the right number, the right kind of data as you go out into the community and talk about the work that you're doing and the economic impact.
Exactly.
And as you are looking to, and I understand that you recently just are setting up a second home. Is that correct?
We are.
Is it too soon to say that?
Yeah, you can say that. That's okay. So we're in the phase of setting up a second house, and we're hoping to break ground. Probably February, March is what we're looking at. And when I say break ground, I mean renovate a home that's close to the first home.
Sure.
And that is in partnership with Bon Secours St. Francis, as well as a number of larger churches in the area that have committed to this project. And that will expand our capacity. It'll triple capacity to be able to serve 15 women. And that second home also includes 2 transitional living apartments as well. So we have to think critically about this whole time frame. We're a 2-year program, but to launch the women back out into the community, we need to know that they're going to safe places when they get out, and how are they going to sustain themselves. So thinking about the housing piece when they come out of the program, obviously there's a affordable housing crisis in Greenville, because we hear about that all the time. Thinking well about what that would look like for these women, giving them the job skills while they're in our program so that they can afford to pay rent and those kind of things to sustain themselves.
You are also getting ready to open a restaurant.
Yeah.
Has that happened yet?
Not yet, but we think that'll be early January.
Okay.
And so we have created several social enterprise initiatives, one being the restaurant, and then also we have a jewelry making and a candle making enterprise. And so those have already gotten off the ground, and we're already selling jewelry and candles that the residents are creating. The restaurant, we hope in the beginning of January that we can get that off the ground. And it will serve to employ the women. And they'll learn job skills. There'll be an apprenticeship program where they can work through, making jewelry, making candles, running a register, chopping vegetables, and the whole gamut of what it takes to actually run a business.
Sure.
So our model really is designed so that our women can excel and be who they want to be, and see where their gifts are and their talents lie. So we hope that a lot of the women would go through our program and work in the social enterprises. When they graduate, they don't lose their jobs in the social enterprises, so they can so they can continue to stay with us and stay in community.
Sure.
So one of the neat parts about what we're doing, I think, is all of the partnerships that we have created in Greenville. Partnerships with Bon Secours St. Francis. They provide 100% free medical care. Christ Church and Trying Mercy Center are the founding partners of Jasmine Road, and so along with them, and we've got the YMCA of Greenville. They provide Y memberships for the women, and they do trauma, we call it trauma drama, but it's applied theater trauma. A lot of trauma-informed yoga and art therapy. So they have multiple therapies, and we partner with United Ministries. We partner with Favor Greenville. We also partner with just a number of agencies, Compass of the Carolinas, and Phoenix Center. So what we're doing with all these partnerships is each time that one of the women is in partnership with for healing with one of those agencies, they develop a little support network within that partnership. And so we're creating multiple support networks for the women. So not only do they know women at Jasmine Road, but they know someone at the Phoenix Center and Julie Valentine Center, so that decreases the likelihood that these women will return back to the streets. So creating a wider safety net for the women is extremely important.
Bigger and bigger community. I've always heard people say that Greenville is a very benevolent community. Do you find that to be true?
We are definitely finding that, and particularly wrapped around this issue and the issue of human trafficking and prostitution and the women that have been on our streets. I've lived in Greenville my whole life, had no idea that this kind of thing was going on the streets of Greenville, and it's definitely on the rise and the increase.
Is it really?
It is, and I think partly because we're understanding what it is, and I can tell you from my work, I've worked in the social work arena pretty much my whole life. But one of my first jobs was working with pregnant teenagers, and I had a fifth grader at elementary school that was pregnant, and you think, like, how does this happen? And what I began to understand, and what she told me, was that her father would have men over at night, and they would be drinking, and he would basically sell her for sex for money for rent. That's human trafficking. Back in the 80s, the late 80s, we didn't have a name for it, but that's now we know that's what that is. So there's a greater understanding of that, but also with the economics of selling women and human trafficking, kind of proliferating within the community and also just within the country. So it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, which is amazing to even think about. So,
as I think about the passion that you have for this and how it's sparked your interest, and you just went right out on the street and started trying to, and then you must have started looking for solutions. How did you even find thistle farms and models throughout the country? How did you discover them? Because it is so innovative what they're doing and different approaches.
Exactly. So when I went out on the streets and I saw what was happening, my first question was, why are they not arresting all these people? Because you would see, I saw dope deals going down. I'd be talking to a woman, and she would say, I'll be back in a minute, and she would walk away and jump in a car with a random stranger, come back 10 minutes later, stuffing money in her bra, and continue the conversation that we were having. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I began to realize that they were either coming from or going to the detention center. So my first step was, well, let me get into the detention center and see if I can talk to them there, where they're away from dope dealers and traffickers and people that would exploit them. So I was able to gain professional visitation privileges with the detention center. In the midst of all that, I created a nonprofit, Emerson's Rest. That was sort of the name for what I was doing. And began going into the detention center. And what I began to understand with the detention center was I started working with women that were court-ordered to rehab. And it really didn't matter if they went to a 1 month or a 1 year rehab. They didn't have a safe place to go when they got out. They were going right back to the streets.
Sure.
So I'm thinking, like, this is a waste of resources. Like, we can do better than this. So, beginning to try to think about how do we mobilize resources and what would be a better pathway. And as I was doing that, Christ Church, Episcopal, and Trying Mercy Center had about 20 women had gone to Thistle Farms and had learned about their model. So they came back to Greenville, and I was invited to this first planning meeting, and they were going around the table talking about, we want to do this in Greenville, but we don't know anybody that knows anything about these women. And I know the women, and I know what's going on the street. streets, and
Yes.
had already been in the jail, working with the women in the jail. So it was just, for me, just
The timing,
it was perfect.
your unique preparation, your own personal experience, and everything
Exactly.
kind of came right to a point where it could be launched.
Right.
Yeah.
And my background with, I owned a bike shop, and so I had business experience from that,
Yes.
and I have done private practice counseling, so I had experience from that, worked with this margin of marginalized women, had experience with that, had my own personal experience of things that had happened in my past that I had to
Sure.
overcome.
Uniquely prepared.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to ask you, first of all, I so admire the work that you do. And
Thank you.
I know that the Clemson MBA students were thrilled to get a chance to come in and learn what you did.
Right.
And it was interesting hearing them talk about this topic that typically isn't brought into an MBA classroom.
Right.
But talking about it and talking about the unique ways that you were addressing it, the businesses, social enterprises that you were creating for these women, and there was just a lot of interest. So they're wrapping up a case study for you now, and going to be presenting that, and then that is going to be presented to our MBA executive board. So there'll be a lot of C-level individuals, different companies in the
Yeah.
room, and we want you to be in the room for that as well, for that presentation. I guess where I wanted to go with that just is, tell me now that you're at this point, and I can hear the passion in your voice, and I bet your wheels are always turning about different things you can do, but what is the most gratifying for you right now? What brings you the greatest joy?
Right. So the most gratifying thing for me is seeing the women that I've known on the streets as I was spending time with them on the streets and in the detention center to come into Jasmine Road. And we haven't graduated the first group yet. That will be in May. We opened in May of 2018.
Okay.
And to see their lives changed, and to see women who literally their hair was falling out and their teeth were falling out, and they had no resources. To see we have two women that are in their third semester at Greenville Tech and have
Amazing.
purchased cars, and to see their gifts and their to see them shine,
Yes.
and to see what we're doing is working. If you provide love, and you provide an opportunity, and you provide those resources, that all those things can come together in the perfect storm in a positive way,
Yes.
and help these women out of the circumstances.
That's
That's truly the most gratifying to me, is to see to see the proof that we've seen in the women that we're working with.
Absolutely. And what would you say, I guess as you think about the most gratifying, and now you're starting to see the fruits of your labor,
Right,
so to
yeah.
speak, what still frustrates you the most?
So I think the hardest part probably of what we're doing, and I will say it's very difficult when you're looking at this type of issue, because it's so complicated. But one of the hardest parts, I think, is breaking down the barriers and the stereotypes, and helping people understand, why should I care about this population of women?
Right.
A lot of
Wow.
people think that women choose prostitution, and one of the things that we say is prostitution is the choice of those with the fewest choices. None of these women woke up and one day and said, I want to be a prostitute. And so it was a lot of things had to go wrong. A lot of systems failed them. They came from broken families, broken backgrounds, and did not have the resources to help themselves. So they wind up in these situations. So really helping our community, and it's the part that I love, is sharing the stories of, when you hear the stories, people think, like, what? Like here in Greenville? And I think people just don't really realize. So being able to be a voice for women and a voice for this issue, I think brings people to the table, and brings people to think about, well, how can I help? What can I do to help these women and to help these individuals?
Absolutely. In your career, in your whole career, what would you say you're the maybe most proud of? What do you feel the most grateful for? Is there one story you would point to, one event, one thing that just stays with you?
Well, I think seeing the culmination of the different things that I've done in my lifetime, and to see all this come together in one, again, perfect storm, because it's very challenging. But to see those things come together, and to feel like that I've been uniquely gifted to be able to work with this population. I was doing a presentation at a church one time, and one of the ladies, when I sat down, asked me, she said, "Didn't you just always know that this was what you were going to do? And I'm like, no. Like, and if anybody had told me this, I would have thought, no, you're crazy. I'm not going to work. This is not what I'm going to be doing. But to see those things, my successes and my failures, all rolled up into one big ball, and to be able to mobilize those resources, really the thing I'm most proud of, again, is the women in our Jasmine Road program, and to see them do the hard work and to reclaim, take back their lives.
And the one thing that comes to mind when you're talking about those women is, how do you get someone's self-esteem to gradually start to, how do you move that needle?
Right.
Because that has to be part of this equation.
Yeah, and it is. And really, it's the shame that's wrapped around, the way that they grew up, the circumstances around them, the things that have happened to them. And one of our biggest challenges is to help women understand this is not who you are. This is something that happened to you.
Right.
And I had to understand that through the history, the things that I've been through.
Sure.
And I love that I can sit across the table from someone either in the detention center or at the Jasmine Road house, and my story's different than your story, but I know what it's like to be so immobilized by shame that you can't move, and to help them see that there is light at the tunnel, and that there are people that care. Most of these women feel invisible, and they don't think anybody in our community cares about them or the things that have happened to them. And I really, from what I've seen with Jasmine Road and the people we've mobilized, people do care about these women, and our women are seeing that they're being paired with mentors that they never would have rubbed shoulders with. And one of our stories from one of our ladies is, she was excited because she took her driver's test, and she had to pay, I think, $800 to get her license back, and she hadn't had a license in 11 years. Wow. And she took her test in a brand new Range Rover, and it was one of the volunteers that she was working with, her mentor. And so just that, having these two populations of women come together that are from very different backgrounds, and to see kind of the magic happen when and to understand, like, there is no us and them, it's just us. And that's something I always say with Jasmine Road when we're trying to understand, our issues, or my issues are different than other people's issues, but at the end of the day, we're a lot more alike than we are different. And seeing people mobilize and come together around that.
I think your credibility goes a long way with these women. I'm sure you have your own story, and there's no doubt that helps make a very strong connection on the trust level. I would think. I think it's interesting that it's about shame. I'm sure you're familiar with the research on shame by Brene Brown.
Yes, I am very familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I didn't know if that ever ties into anything you do or any of the conversations, but it's not a word we talk about a lot. But it's a word we all experience at some point.
Exactly. And we're all afraid to talk about it because it must mean I'm bad or something's wrong. And for me, the exciting part too is for women that have, once they understand their story and they process their story, where they can say, this is just what happened to me. This is not who I am.
Right.
And that they can take back their lives. And that really is an interesting part of what we're doing at Jasmine Road, because our social enterprise restaurant is at 503 Augusta Street, so right in the heart of downtown Greenville.
Sure.
I mean, we could have put it out on White Horse Road somewhere, and someone may argue, well, maybe you should have put it out there. But we wanted these women to be right in the heart of our community. There's no shame in what has happened to them, and for them to live in that message that I belong to this community.
Wow.
And to be able to really to take back this community for themselves, and to enjoy all the benefits that you and I enjoy in the community. It's a really important message with Jasmine Road.
That's interesting that you say that, because I wondered how it would be for them coming from this space and then working in the restaurant.
Right.
But the narrative you just shared, is like, I have had a lot of courage, and I'm here, and I survived, and I have a good message, and I can encourage others.
Right.
So that's hearing that just makes me want to eat there every day. So
we had someone ask me, well, how are you going to protect these women once they're in the restaurant? And I'm like, they are perfectly capable of protecting themselves.
Yes.
And these women have survived things that you and I probably would never have survived. Most people would not have survived.
Right.
But when you take that survivor, the mentality, the strength that they've developed, going through the things that they've been through, and you mobilize that in a positive way and help them understand, like I said, there is no us and them, it's just us. And, being able to let them shine and be who they want to be. They don't have to work in our restaurant, but if they want to, they can.
Sure.
If they choose to work with candles and not ever interact with the public, they can do that too. So
That's nice.
really it's about offering opportunities and freedom for these women to choose.
And I can just only imagine the synergy that happens when you have women ready to graduate and you have women coming into the program and they see that it's possible.
Exactly. Well, I had the privilege of taking the woman I was telling you about that was arrested 23 times I teach trauma groups in the detention center. So I took her into the detention center with me to facilitate one of the trauma groups. And so she was terrified to go in there, but she was phenomenal. And what was so interesting was there were a couple of women in my group that had been on streets with her. And one of them looked at her with tears streaming down her eyes, and she said,
Oh, wow.
"If you can do it, I can do it." Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what, as we are graduating women, they are much more qualified than I am to carry this message, really.
Yeah.
And for them to go out on the streets or to be involved with some of the women that we are talking with about coming into the program,
Sure.
to say, "I did it." And, that's my message. If I could survive the things I did, you can do it too. I know, and
Oh,
with the
yes.
proper resources. So it's really neat to see that come full circle for our women.
So you're really building ambassadors.
We are.
You really
Yeah.
are building, and the longer you do this, the more that strength will grow of this core of women
Right.
that will be able to support other women and encourage them and model.
Exactly. And it's so empowering for our women to as they take that step of healing, and to be able to share their experiences and to be validated that your story does mean something.
I love the fact, too, that you had a business before. So business and moving these women towards a business,
Right.
teaching them to run a cash register, being in a restaurant is just a microcosm for, customer service and all the things you do in
tons of
any
things.
business.
Exactly.
Yeah. So tell me again the name of the restaurant.
Jasmine Kitchen.
Jasmine Kitchen.
Jasmine
Okay.
Kitchen, yeah. And we'll have an apprenticeship program built into their training process for the restaurant, which will include soft skills and things like that, not just the actual skills of running the register and cooking the food and that kind of thing. So we really want to be able for the women to launch in the community in other job capacities as well after going through our training program. There are a lot of barriers for these women because of their involvement with the criminal justice system and backgrounds and that kind of thing. So we're working to help overcome those as well. But really for these women to decide what they want to do.
And Beth, don't you feel like, I'm just curious with what's going on in our state and some of the different awareness levels that have been raised about individuals that have maybe served time. Don't you think it's better now than it used to be? Or catch me up on that. Do you?
Yeah, well, I think reentry is a huge, it's something that our community is talking about, and that wraps into giving people, choices and opportunities. And I think our community is realizing that if you don't give someone that opportunity, the likelihood of them winding back up and incarcerated and in the system is really great. So, that's part of what I love about Jasmine Road. When we first started this, we were serving 5 women. And so thinking about, that's a lot of women that are a lot of money to serve 5 women, but understanding this is a 2-year program and we're not putting a Band-Aid on a problem. We're really working with them arm in arm for 2 years so that they can launch back into the community and not return to the lifestyle that they came from. And it takes a long time of support and understanding and resources for us to be able to do that. But I do think conversations around reentry that's something that's relatively new. That's not been happening for a long time. So I think that's a positive there.
Yeah. I think that this is one of the most, to me, you remind me of, and we have an innovation and creativity class, and we study inventors and how creativity works, in business and entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship.
Right.
But it's usually very iterative, and it builds on things, and it takes a period of time. You don't get it with the first thing. It's you keep moving forward. To me, that's what your journey feels like with these women. It feels like I can only imagine what you're thinking about in terms of future.
Exactly.
I just have a feeling that I can imagine where it could go from here.
Right.
Because I can tell it's not a one and done with you.
Oh, it's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and the sky's really the limit.
Yeah.
Like what do you want? I mean, that's the question. Like, this is their lives.
Yeah.
And we don't try to come up with what we think their lives should look like or what they should be, but we want to help them tap that internally. What do they want to do? Do you want to go back to school, or do you what do you want to do? So I think as we grow Jasmine Road, there's going to be a number that we'll sit on as far as women in our program and that kind of thing. But one of the big issues too is the affordable housing,
right.
And so it's not going to do us any good to churn out a bunch of graduates that can't find anywhere to live. So we already have those kind of conversations going and those kind of things in the works in thinking about this comprehensive long-term program. And it really starts before they come to Jasmine Road, because it takes sometimes it's taken me 2 years to build a relationship with someone where they believe that you're really going to do what you say you're going to do, because no one in their world has ever done that. They've been let down by everybody, and so building those relationships, and then they come into Jasmine Road eventually at some point when they're ready, and then they graduate, and then what does that look like? So we what Thistle Farms, they call it Sisters for Life, and so we look at that. This is a lifelong community of support that these women will have with Jasmine Road and with some of the mentors and the people that are involved in their life.
Do you, as I listen to you, do you consider yourself a disruptor?
Oh yeah,
I'm hearing
it. Yeah. That my staff laughs at me because I love controversy, not necessarily controversy for the sake of controversy, but you have to be a disruptor. You have to initiate change somewhere. And even as we were putting these, thinking about Jasmine Road and the founding partners and the women. Two totally different populations, and one of the things I always say is this is going to be fun. Like I love the thought of putting these two groups of women together that they don't know anything about each other, and to watch the magic happen, and to see what's neat for me is when you think about it, you're thinking, well, these founding partners are going to be helping these women, but what happens is the founding partners and the women that become involved as mentors are changed just as much as our Jasmine Road women.
I have no doubt about it.
Exactly. So, you for me, as I look over the pattern of my life, I think I've been a disruptor my whole life. And conflict. I mean, conflict is so important, I think, in moving the needle forward. So.
Yes, and yet sometimes we're very conflict avoidant, especially in the South.
Yes, definitely.
That's interesting that you are all of that, and then you've worked with these two different churches that are way on the different end of the spectrum.
They are, yes.
With Christ Church and with Triune, they serve different populations, but somehow you were the person that kind of could pull this together once they found you, and really work with both of them and run with this mission. And I would imagine as you get more and more data and gather numbers on your people and what the cost savings is to the actual community, then it seems like hopefully the community will work with you on housing and other more proactive.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what we're hoping for. And I think the more relationships we build with other people in the community, and the more people that can interact with these women.
Sure.
If you look at one of them, we were talking about one of the girls. She wanted us to print out her record and her criminal record, and it was like 4 or 5 pages. And I'm looking at that, going, I wouldn't hire you if I saw all this stuff on a piece of paper and I was an employer. Like no, but helping to bridge those barriers, and what we hope to be able to show to the community is this person is a graduate of Jasmine Road.
Yes.
This person has graduated from this apprenticeship program, and they've done this, and they've all those ingredients that that would come together where someone would be willing to take a chance on our graduates. And we already have some of that in the making, and some employers that have reached out and have been willing to employ some of the women. So I'm hoping that we can expand what that looks like as well.
Right, and it sounds like a presentation to like a GSHRM, all the human resource professionals, to raise their awareness of this program and your graduates, and coming to your restaurant and actually getting to see them on the job and interface with them, and see their demeanor, not just once but maybe several times, and get to know some of those people to say well, who do we want to maybe engage with and think about. So I think you're building a platform where your people actually could make a lot of good contacts and become known as someone who took good care of them in a restaurant. And
well, and that is part of what our social enterprise initiatives and the restaurant in particular, that interface with the women and the public, and to see genuine relationships form. and for them to have access. Some of these women have made relationships that have a lot of access in the community that I don't even have.
Yeah.
With the relationships that they have, just
Sure.
just by virtue of being mentors and that kind of thing. So we want to just continue that process and hope those relationships happen organically, and we've seen that happen.
That's always the best way.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was just one thing that I wanted to kind of to bring up is you are so creative, and you've gone after this audacious goal, and you've somehow made these things happen. And what would you say to other people who have goals or want to disrupt or create,
Right.
or what would you say to them, whatever kind of business they're in, or organization, or entrepreneur, or even nonprofit? What would you
Right.
say to them in terms of kind of going after their goal?
Well, I think it's important to follow your heart, and I think it's important to do your research. And
Both, the whole brain.
Exactly. Because I know a lot of what I've done in my lifetime have been, I've discovered, well, this isn't being addressed, and then sort of start following the breadcrumbs of how can I make a difference in that particular issue. You can't be afraid of failure. I failed more times probably than I've succeeded.
Yes, I wondered about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, understanding that that's just part of the process, and really, again, doing research and finding, is there anyone out there that's doing what you're thinking about doing? And that when we created
Further down the path.
Exactly. Yeah. When we created Jasmine Road, that was we visited anybody that was providing addiction services to the women in our community or in other places, and asked questions. And we were very fortunate that Thistle Farms shared all their institutional knowledge with us, and so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel
Right.
in a lot of places. So doing that research and finding out, like, does this already exist, or if it does, should I join in and bring my expertise to it, or if it doesn't exist, how can I create a pocket? And then I think you have to, like what we're thinking about with Jasmine Road, you have to follow it from beginning to end, like not just not just having this great idea, but you got to think about, where's that idea going to go?
Yeah.
And just like for me, when these women graduate from Jasmine Road, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Because if I don't know the answer to that question, then the likelihood of them going back to the streets
Right.
is pretty high. So,
Right.
I think you playing the story out and following that through, and knowing as much, asking questions and doing as much research as you can.
I'm hearing a very long-term commitment here, as
Yeah.
you said, a lifelong commitment here
Right.
to these women, and measurement even 8 to 10, years out in terms of recidivism and that kind of thing.
Exactly.
That's really what you're looking to do.
And one of the most beautiful things, I think, because I'll be honest with you, when I went, I'd been working with this population of women, and I heard about Thistle Farms, and their model is basically they took 5 women over 20 years ago, put them in a home, and said, what do you need? Like, no authority in the home, and that's their model. Like, we don't have a live-in staff, and I thought, like, these women are going to burn the house down. Like, I know these women, it's not going to work. So I went up there very skeptical, like, of this model, like, how does this work? But what I encountered, I met one of the first 5 women that had been put in that program over 20 years ago, and she was still at Thistle Farms in a professional capacity. I met women that graduated 20 years ago and 10 years ago and 5 years ago, and so seeing what was happening with these women, and that the secret to all that was you're creating, and we are creating new community for these women. And if you think about that, like, we all want to belong.
Yes, we do.
That's why
Yes,
we're
we do.
members of the Poinsett Club, or
Yeah,
have a basketball team, or whatever. We all want to belong.
We're wired that way.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that, unfortunately, with this issue that we're tackling, that's what traffickers tap into. I'm your family. Call me daddy. They tattoo their initials and on their necks, or wherever they decide to. But they're tapping into that community and that love and belonging. I'm going to take care of you. All you've got to do is sleep with a few people and give me the money, but I'm going to provide a roof over your head. So, so really, for us to be able to provide community, and a community that has no expectation of return, like, we don't expect these women. There's no strings attached with what we're doing, and so and looking at it like that, these women have become my friends, and they're people that I know are going to be in my life for a long, long time. So having for me, that long-term vision of thinking about, this is where we're starting. You got to start somewhere. We started with 5, and a lot of people, because this task that we are on is so daunting, and I could have filled of 25 beds with the women that I know that are in the detention center, that are on the streets, that need a service like Jasmine Road. But we started with 5.
Is that the hard part, Beth, when you know people that really want to get in, that really need to get in, but you can't?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is difficult, and to be able to say no, or to say, sometimes it's, we say no because they we don't have the space, but because we know they're not ready.
They're not ready.
Yeah, they're not ready. And so much that we put a lot of resources in the women that we're helping. So we're really trying to figure out, some of the women that we think are going to succeed don't, and some of the women that we think there's no way they actually succeed. So there's really not a science to it, but really it is difficult because we don't have enough beds, and there's not enough resources. There's not enough rehabs for women, with this population of women. Rehab being like one of the first steps that needs to happen. What's interesting about this population is not only do you have a human trafficking victim, but you've got most likely a victim of childhood sexual abuse. You've got someone that has experienced multiple sexual assaults, domestic violence victim. You've got someone that probably dropped out of school, so you've got lack of education, you've got addiction issues. So, and the list really goes on and on of the issues that we're dealing with. And so where do you start? For us, we started, with the Housing First model. Home is the heart of our program, and providing a home where these women can rest and heal and don't have to worry about somebody breaking in and stealing their stuff or, that kind of thing. So that, starting with that home and then providing those supportive services has been really instrumental in what we're doing.
And very much like Thistle Farms. And,
Right.
and I understand, and probably you will have you'll do some things different than Thistle Farms, I would imagine.
Right.
I know they've been kind of modeled all across the country.
Exactly. So they have sister communities, and so we're one of the sister communities of Thistle Farms. And basically, you agree to provide long-term housing for free, and you agree to provide job opportunities for the women. And there's a little bit more that goes into it than that, but there's about 40 Thistle Farms sister communities throughout the country. We're the only one in South Carolina, and they're all at various stages of getting themselves off the ground. And so we also have that national network and resource when I have a woman that comes to me that really needs to get out of Greenville, and can get out of some of them can't leave the state because of the criminal justice issues that are facing them. But when they can, we have that sister network.
Nice.
And we also could accept someone from another community if we wanted to into the program.
Right. Okay.
So it's nice to have that network.
Absolutely. I have to ask you, when you look at yourself and your role now and the things that you're doing, I want to know a couple of personal things. What is it that you like about yourself, and what is it that you don't like about yourself as you are being kind of a leader in all this?
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things
Very much a leader.
Thank you for saying that. One of the things that I like about myself, I think, is that I feel like I can talk to anybody. And I feel like it doesn't matter if you came from the street or, that you're a millionaire. That I can have a conversation, a meaningful conversation. And, and my underlying goal in that conversation is thinking about wheels turning, how can I bring this person together with this person?
Yes.
So I love bringing people together and uniting around a common goal. So, that for me would be the thing that I think I like the most.
And how meaningful that is. I'm hearing that, how meaningful for you that is.
It is.
That you can do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that goes, speaks to, again, my upbringing and things that I was taught. And there is no us and them, and really living that out. I love that part. I think the thing that I'm not as organized as I would like to be. Sometimes that's a function of all the stuff that's going on in my brain at any given moment. But I would love to be more. My husband is very organized and ducks in a row, and and fortunately I have staff members that do those things. So
it is enviable, isn't it?
It is.
When people seem to have all that together and do that.
Yeah. A lot of stuff lives in my brain.
Yeah. And what you're describing is really the hallmark of creativity and innovation.
Right.
And that's what you've brought to really everything you've kind of touched here. And I know you will continue to do that. How would you describe innovation?
So I would describe innovation as doing something that has not ever been done before, and being willing to step out of the box and taking a chance, being creative. If you asked me if I was a creative person a number of years ago, I probably would have associated creativity with artistic. Art. Yeah, and it's not that.
No.
And so I remember in art class when I was younger, my art teacher kind of squinting at what I was drawing because I'm not an artist, but I've always, creativity is something that comes naturally for me for whatever reason. So, I think that, that innovation and being innovative is thinking outside the box and not marching to the same drum that everybody else is, and thinking critically about issues and things, not doing something just because it's always been done that way.
Right. And imagining the possibilities is what I'm hearing,
Exactly.
which will be such a benefit to the people that are in your program, because you will think of all kinds of new and different ways for them to look at the world and accomplish things, and they're going to need that.
Right, yeah. Changing the lens of, that they're looking through.
Absolutely. Is there anything new that you're curious about? Anything that you've been seeing on the horizon, or what are you curious about now?
Well, I am what you were talking about with prison reentry, and I am curious about how that's going to go in the community, how well received that the community would join hands and be willing to employ people that are coming out of prison. So that's one thing. I'm very curious, interested in the criminal justice system, and that and mobilizing change in the criminal justice system. I've got something that I've been working on behind the scenes for about 3 years that I would like to see happen in Greenville, involving the criminal justice system and these women and diversion courts and that kind of thing. So really curious to see if we could get some traction in doing some other sort of out-of-the-box type thinking that could continue to move the needle.
And I think there are people in our community that in that arena that would very well be interested in having conversations with you at a higher level and even at a more functional. So that's really interesting. I do know that a lot of employers now are more open just because of the tight labor market, and because it's getting tighter and tighter. And so they're looking for good people, dedicated, loyal people, and I do think that I mean, traveling more in the HR circles, I do hear people now talking more about people with special needs, hiring different people, hiring people that don't look like everybody else or maybe have a different background. So hopefully there will be good receptivity to that.
I hope so.
Yeah. I think having you as their advocate has to feel really wonderful, though. Just your passion and your strength and your perseverance. I mean, it's just written all over you. So I'm sure that has to really be matter. That has to really make a difference for them. So best advice you ever received, and I loved what you said about your mom already. Thank everybody.
Exactly.
But anything else you would share in terms of best advice?
One of the therapists that I was seeing when I was going through, in my early 20s, dealing with some of the things that happened to me, I remember him saying, he said, pee or get off the pot. so that, I mean, do something. And so don't just talk about it, do something. And so really taking that advice to heart and seeing, instead of talking about what was out of my control, what is in your control?
Yes.
What can you do something about? And all of us have something we can do something about. So figuring out what that is, I think that has been a driver sort of behind the scenes in my mind.
So it resonated with you and pushed you at that point to act on some of the things you needed to do.
Right. Yeah. And that's the way that the key to recovering from trauma. You've got to do something.
Yeah.
You've got, instead of being in that victim role, you've got to be willing to step out of that and say, okay, how can I take control of my life? Again, this is something that happened to me, but it's not who I am.
Right.
And moving and helping that to perpetuate, to move forward, and I was able to do that, and I see that the women that I serve, they can do the same thing with the right resources.
So our podcast goes out to all Clemson alums, and it goes out on the Clemson network, and we hope people will be listening to it. But what would you want to say to people listening to you in terms of the needs of Jasmine Road right now? Is there anything in particular you would like to share with the audience as far as ways that they can help or be involved?
Sure. So as we move forward with Jasmine Road, we have needs big and small, all the way from toilet paper to funding for our second house. So there's tons of ways to give financially. So always that's appreciated.
Okay.
Gift cards, people give us gift cards for Walmart and the grocery store and gas station. So things like that are always beneficial to the program that we're working working on. And I would say, being open to this issue and
Yeah.
understanding that this issue does affect us all.
Yes.
And everybody can do their part in, different kinds of ways. You may not be called to volunteer with the Women of Jasmine Road, but if you are, you could go to our website and and become a volunteer. Once we get our second house redone, then we'll be furnishing that second house. So we have a wedding registry that people could go on and buy things for the second house, and all that is on our website. JasmineRoad.org is the website. So those things will be forthcoming on the website as we're moving forward.
Wonderful. We have interviewed a lot of people on our show, and one of the things that we do ask is, how do you want to be remembered?
Oh, wow. I want to be remembered as someone that loved. Love is extremely important to me, and I fiercely love and defend those women that I'm working with Jasmine Road. So I think looking at that and and someone that is marked with grace and mercy. So I think that's how I would want to be remembered.
I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that I should have asked you but I didn't ask you?
I don't think so.
Well, Beth, you are so inspiring, and
thank you for saying that.
You are so inspiring, and I'm just thrilled that we had the chance to talk about and catch up on where you are and what you're doing. We've met a while back, but so much has happened for you since then, and we appreciate your partnership with the Clemson MBA, and look forward to you coming in, and hopefully we've created a document that might at least kind of share some of your details and put some things in a case study so that you will have it, but we will be sharing it in some of our other classes.
Well, we're so appreciative of the partnership with you guys and helping us. That's something that has sort of been on the back burner that we've wanted to do and just haven't had the capacity to get that done. So I'm really grateful that you guys took the lead on that, and we're looking forward to seeing what you have to say.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we just wrapped up the semester, so students
awesome.
have just turned those in, and we're just doing some review on those right now, and then we'll do the official presentation, but we'll be sharing the case study with you first, so get your approval on sharing.
I'm sure.
Share it. You'll get the first look at it, make sure you're comfortable with it. But again, I just want to say thank you so much for all that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You're so welcome.
Thank you.